called me on a Tuesday morning, not to say hello, not to ask how I was doing, just to tell me that the payments I'd been sending every month needed to go up. "The grocery prices have gone up, Dad," she said. "Not my daughter. My daughter-in-law. I want to make sure you understand that from the start." I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, looking out at the backyard I'd been meaning to reseed for 3 years, and I thought, I have been paying their groceries, their utilities, their streaming subscriptions, their car insurance, and now she's calling me, not my son, her, to tell me it's not enough. I said I'd look at the numbers. I always said I'd look at the numbers. That was 2 weeks before I found out about the wedding. Let me back up, because if I just tell you the ending, you won't understand the weight of it. You won't understand what it cost me to get there. I'm 63 years old. I built a small chain of dry cleaning businesses over 30 years. Nothing glamorous. I drove a used truck until the transmission went. I wore the same 3 pairs of khakis for decades. I ate lunch at my desk most days, a sandwich I packed myself, because every dollar I didn't spend was a dollar I could put back into the business or set aside for my son. His name is my son. That's how I'll refer to him, because by the end of this, the name doesn't matter as much as what he became. His mother, my ex-wife, and I separated when he was 11. It was civil enough. No court battles, no screaming matches in parking lots. We divided things fairly, and we both stayed in his life. I paid more than my share of support because I wanted to. Because I didn't want him to feel the difference. I didn't want him to go to a birthday party and feel like the kid whose parents couldn't afford the gift. Looking back, that might have been the first mistake. He was smart. Sharp, actually. Teachers liked him. He had a way of reading a room, knowing what people wanted to hear and saying it with just enough sincerity that they believed it. I thought that was a gift. I thought it would take him far. It took him far, all right, just not in the direction I'd hoped. He graduated high school and told me he wanted to start a business. He had an idea, a mobile car detailing service. I thought it was reasonable. I gave him $12,000 to get started. Equipment, supplies, a used van, some marketing materials. I told him, this is a loan, but I said it the way fathers say things they don't really mean. He knew I wouldn't collect. The business lasted about 8 months. He said the market wasn't right. I believed him. Then it was a landscaping partnership with a friend that dissolved because the friend was unreliable. Then a food truck concept that never got past the planning stage. Then a couple years of just nothing. He was figuring things out. He was 26, 27, 28. I kept sending money. Not huge amounts. Enough to keep the lights on. Enough so he didn't have to worry. I told myself I was giving him a runway. Time to find himself. I'd read enough articles about young men taking longer to launch these days. I was patient. I was supportive. I was a fool. But I didn't know it yet. He met her at 29. I'll call her my daughter-in-law, though that title still sits wrong in my chest when I say it. She was 26, came from a family with money, real money, not the kind I'd scraped together over 30 years, but inherited money, the kind that comes with a certain posture. Her parents had a vacation house. They drove new cars every 2 years. They looked at my slightly too old truck and my off-brand boots and said all the right things with their mouths while their eyes said something else entirely. I didn't hold that against her at first. People are products of their environments. I understood that. What I should have paid more attention to was how quickly my son changed after he met her. The way he started talking about building a life that looked a certain way. The restaurants they wanted to go to, the apartment they needed, not wanted, needed, in a part of the city that was well beyond anything he could afford on his own. Which is where I came in. Again. They found a place. 2 bedrooms, open floor plan, the kind of kitchen with the big island in the middle that looks like something from a magazine. The rent was $3,100 a month. I told him that was a lot. He said they needed the space. I asked him what he was doing for income. He said he had some consulting work lined up. He said my daughter-in-law was going to pick up more hours at the interior design firm where she'd been working part-time. I looked at the numbers in my head. I looked at my son's face. And I wrote the check. I told myself it was temporary. A bridge. 6 months, maybe a year, while they got established. I set up a recurring transfer. $1,800 a month toward their rent. They'd cover the rest. The consulting work never materialized. The interior design firm cut her hours instead of increasing them. I found this out not from my son, but gradually through the math. The rest they were covering started showing up on my end, too. First, it was just a few hundred here and there. Then it became a second recurring transfer. Then the call about groceries. By the time she called me that Tuesday morning about raising the payments, I had been covering nearly all of their expenses for 16 months. I was 62 years old, and I was funding a lifestyle for 2 adults in their early 30s who had, between them, produced nothing except a very nice Instagram presence. I said I'd look at the numbers. Then I hung up and sat down at my kitchen table and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I added it all up. Every transfer. Every loan. Every time I told myself it was temporary. It was well past $200,000 over the years, possibly closer to $250,000 if I counted the early business money. I sat with that number for a long time. I didn't call my son that day. I didn't want to say anything I couldn't take back. I needed to think. I had a friend, a man I'd known since we were both in our 20s, a straight shooter who'd never been afraid to tell me when I was being an idiot, and I called him instead. He listened to the whole thing. When I finished, there was a pause. "You know what you need to do," he said. I did know. I just wasn't ready to do it yet. That weekend, my son called me. Not about money for once. He wanted to get lunch. Just the two of us. I thought maybe, I let myself think maybe. He was calling to have a real conversation. To talk about things. I got my hopes up. I shouldn't have. Lunch was fine. We talked about sports. We talked about a show he was watching. He told me a funny story about a neighbor. I kept waiting for him to say something real, and he never did. When the check came, I reached toward automatically, the way I always did, and he let me take it, the way he always did. Driving home, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cut things off cold, but I was going to start asking questions, start having direct conversations, start treating this like what it was, a business arrangement that had gotten completely out of hand, and renegotiate the terms like a grown man talking to another grown man. I called him 2 days later. I told him I wanted to sit down and talk about the financials, that I'd been doing a lot of thinking, that I loved him, but that I felt like we needed a plan, a real one, with a timeline, a goal for when he'd be fully independent. He said that sounded good. He said absolutely. He said he'd been thinking about it too. We scheduled it for the following Saturday. On Friday night, my phone buzzed. It was my son. Not a call, a text. "Something came up," he said. "Can we reschedule?" I said sure. He didn't reschedule. 2 weeks went by. I sent a message. He said he'd been slammed. We'd figure it out soon. I said okay. The monthly transfer kept going out. I was still thinking about how to have the conversation, still giving him the benefit of the doubt. And then a mutual family friend, my cousin's wife, who'd been friendly with my son since he was a teenager, sent me a message on a Sunday afternoon. She said she'd seen the photos and she just wanted to say congratulations. I didn't know what she was talking about. I asked her. She sent me a link to my son's social media page. I wasn't connected to him there. He'd never suggested it and I'd never pushed. But the post was public. It was a wedding photo. My son and my daughter-in-law, dressed formally, standing in front of what looked like a garden somewhere with flowers I didn't recognize. She was in a white dress. He was in a suit I had never seen him wear. They were both laughing at something off camera. The caption said, "We did it. Just the people who matter most. The rest of the world finds out now." There were 214 comments congratulating them. I was not in a single photograph. I put my phone face down on the table. I picked up my coffee mug and realized my hand was shaking slightly. I set the mug down too. I sat in my living room in the quiet for a very long time. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. The kind that presses in on you. My son had gotten married. He had planned a wedding, selected a venue, bought a suit, invited guests, 214 comments worth of people who knew, and he had not told me. Had not invited me. Had, apparently, made a decision that I was not among the people who matter most. I thought about every transfer I'd made, every check I'd written, every time I'd sat across from him at a restaurant and paid the bill. I thought about the Saturday I drove 40 minutes to help him move into the apartment I was subsidizing, and how I'd carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken, and how afterward he'd said thanks and handed me a bottle of beer like I was a college buddy who'd helped him move instead of his father. I thought about all of that. And then I thought about something else. I thought about the conversation I'd been trying to schedule. The one he kept rescheduling, and I wondered if he'd been avoiding it not because he was busy, but because he knew what was coming. And he'd wanted to lock in a certain legal status before I got there. A wife has different standing than a girlfriend when things get complicated. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not naive either. I didn't call him that night. I slept on it. I didn't sleep well, but I slept on it. The next morning, I called a friend of mine who did estate and business planning. Not to do anything dramatic, just to understand my position, to know where I stood and what my options were. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, my daughter-in-law called. Now my son. Her. "Hey," she said, with the particular brightness she used when she wanted something. "I just wanted to check in about this month's transfer. I don't see it yet." I had actually stopped the transfer. I'd done it quietly, 48 hours after I saw the wedding photos, while I was still deciding what to say and how to say it. "I've been meaning to call you both," I said. "Congratulations, by the way." There was a pause. A short one, but I heard it. "Oh, thank you." It was really intimate. Very last minute, we just decided to do it. "When was it?" I asked. Another pause. "Just last weekend. It was really spontaneous." "The photos have been up for 4 days," I said. Not accusingly. Just as a fact. She didn't say anything for a moment. "I would have liked to have been there," I said. "I want you to know that. However you felt about it at the time, I want you to understand what that meant to miss." "Dad, we just wanted something small. You had over 100 guests," I said. "I'd counted the tags in the photos. That's not small. That's a choice." She shifted. I could hear it in her breathing. The way it changed when she realized the conversation wasn't going the direction she'd expected. "We can celebrate together soon," she said. "We'd love to do a dinner." "I've also been thinking about our financial arrangement," I said. Long pause. "I've been supporting you both for going on 2 years now," I said. "I've been patient. I've been waiting for a plan that never came. I scheduled a conversation with my son about this, and he canceled and never rescheduled. So I want to say it plainly now, I'm ending the monthly transfers. Dad," her voice changed. "Harder now. We have rent due. I know we can't cover it without. I know we can't cover it without. I know," I said again. You can't just." She stopped to restart it. "My son, our son, he needs to know about this. You need to talk to him directly." "I've been trying to talk to him directly for 2 months," I said. "I'm happy to have that conversation, but the transfers have stopped either way. That decision is made." She hung up. My son called 11 minutes later. He did not call to apologize for the wedding. He did not call to explain or to acknowledge what it might have felt like for me to find out the way I did. He called about the rent. I let him talk. He was frustrated. Then he was conciliatory. Then he was frustrated again. He said I was overreacting. He said the wedding was a spontaneous decision, and there wasn't time to plan invitations. I reminded him that I'd seen the venue. The flowers, the professional photographs, Those things don't happen spontaneously. You've been sending money because you wanted to, he said. Nobody forced you. That was the sentence. That was the one that landed differently than anything else he'd said, not because it was cruel, though it was, but because it was the clearest he'd ever been with me. More honest than anything he'd said in years. He was right. Nobody had forced me. You're right, I said. Nobody forced me, and nobody can force me to keep going. He called back twice more that afternoon. I let both calls go to voicemail. The messages were long and went in circles. I listened to them once, then deleted them. Over the next week and a half, I did a few things quietly and deliberately. I called my estate planning contact and had some documents updated. I reviewed the terms of the business, the dry cleaning chain, which was still generating income, and I made sure my own financial house was in order in a way it hadn't been before because I'd been too focused on supporting someone else's house. I heard from my son's mother. He'd called her apparently, looking for leverage or sympathy or both. She called me not to take his side, but to check on me. That surprised me. We hadn't spoken in a meaningful way in years. She said, "I hope you know this isn't your fault." I told her I was working on believing that. I heard from my daughter-in-law's mother once. A brief, formal voicemail saying that she hoped the family situation could be resolved civilly. I didn't return it. My son and I didn't speak for almost 3 weeks. Then he showed up. Not called. Showed up. Knocked on my door on a Thursday evening when I was in the middle of making dinner. I opened the door and there he was, looking more tired than I'd seen him look in years. Less polished. The sharpness he usually carried was gone from his face. "Can I come in?" he said. I stepped back and let him in. I turned off the stove. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd added up the numbers that night, and we talked. Really talked. Maybe for the first time in longer than I can say. He didn't apologize for the wedding right away. He talked around it for a while, but eventually he got there. He said he'd known, when they were planning it, that something was wrong about not calling me. He said my daughter-in-law had convinced him it would be better to keep it small, that mixing family finances and wedding invitations would make things complicated. He used that word, complicated. And I heard in it the shape of every conversation they must have had about me. I asked him if he understood what complicated actually meant to me. That I had been sitting at a table just like this one, adding up years of transfers, trying to find the moment when generosity became something else. When support became subsidy, became expectation, became entitlement. He looked at the table. "I didn't think about it that way," he said. "No," I said. "You didn't." We sat with that for a while. I told him I wasn't going to pretend the last few years hadn't happened. But I also wasn't ready to write him off as a son. Those were two different things, and I needed him to understand that. I told him the money was done, not as punishment, as reality. I was 63 years old, and I had my own future to plan, and I had let my focus drift for too long. That was going to change. I told him that if he wanted a relationship with me, a real one, not a financial arrangement with conversation on the side, I was open to that. But it would have to be built differently than what we'd had. He nodded. He didn't say much, but he didn't leave right away either. He stayed for almost 2 hours. I reheated dinner and we ate together, which we hadn't done in a very long time. When he left, he hugged me at the door. It was brief and a little stiff, the way hugs are when people are out of practice. But it was real. I'll give it that. I don't know what happens from here. I won't pretend I do. I don't know if my son and his wife will figure out their finances. I don't know if she'll ever see me as anything other than a resource that got cut off. I don't know if the marriage will hold or what kind of man my son will choose to be when the safety net is gone. What I know is this. I spent the better part of a decade trying to protect my son from difficulty. And somewhere along the way, I'd confused protecting him with doing the living for him. Those aren't the same thing. It took losing myself in the equation to finally understand that. My friend, the straight shooter, took me out for dinner last week. Good steakhouse. The kind we used to go to when we were younger and pretended we could afford it more than we could. We ordered what we wanted and talked for 3 hours, and at the end of the night he said, "You look like yourself again." I thought about that on the drive home. Somewhere between the transfers and the canceled conversations and the Tuesday morning call about groceries, I had stopped looking like myself. I'd become something smaller, a function, a wallet, a background figure in someone else's story. I'm 63 years old. I still have time to be the main character in mine. That's what I told myself driving home. The highway was mostly empty. The radio was on low. And for the first time in longer than I can honestly remember, the quiet felt like mine. I keep thinking about a specific Tuesday morning. Not the Tuesday she called about groceries, but the one before all of this started, when I was standing in my kitchen, coffee in hand, watching nothing in particular through the window, feeling vaguely like something was wrong but unable to name it. That feeling had been living in my chest for a long time. I just kept finding reasons not to listen to it. What I understand now, looking back, is that the problem didn't start with the wedding. It didn't start with the rent. It started the first time I wrote a check and told myself it was love when it was really just fear. Fear of being the father who wasn't enough. Fear of watching my son struggle. Fear of the distance that might grow between us if I ever said no. I confused generosity with goodness, and I confused keeping someone comfortable with actually caring for them. Those are not the same things. I know that now in a way I didn't know it when it mattered. My son is a smart man. That's the part that still gets me. He's genuinely intelligent, quick, perceptive, good with people. But intelligence without integrity is just a more efficient way to rationalize what you want. And without the willingness to do hard things, to work, to be accountable, to sit with discomfort instead of calling someone else to fix it. Intelligence becomes a tool for getting out of things rather than building them. I watched that happen slowly over years, and I told myself it was a phase. It wasn't a phase. It was a direction. And I helped point him there. I'm not saying this to punish myself. I'm saying it because the cause and the effect were real, and pretending otherwise wouldn't help either of us. What I had to reckon with, the thing that kept me up those first few nights after I stopped the transfers, was that I had been so focused on giving my son everything I didn't have that I forgot to give him the one thing that actually mattered. The experience of earning something, the knowledge deep in the body that you can handle difficulty, that when things fall apart, you can put them back together with your own hands. I took that from him by accident, one generous transfer at a time. That's the kind of mistake that doesn't announce itself. It just accumulates quietly until one day you're looking at a wedding photo you weren't in, and the math finally becomes impossible to ignore. The night my son sat at my kitchen table, tired, a little humbled, more honest than he'd been in years, I saw something in him I hadn't seen in a long time, something unguarded. Maybe that's where it starts over. Not with money, not with a plan, not with promises. Just two people sitting across from each other without a transaction between them for the first time in longer than either of us could say. I'm 63. The highway home was quiet. And I thought, I still have time to do this differently. So does he. That has to be enough to start with.